A very common problem with getting into a role with a lot of responsibility in a party, like healing, is that feeling that any mistake you make can clearly be traced back to you, even at the back of the party. It makes it feel like it is painfully obvious for others if you make a mistake at all. And that is often what can lead to this thing we know as Healanxiety. Healxiety. Healxiety. You know what I mean. This fear of failure or the uncertain can often lead players to never even try healing, and while that is perfectly okay, healing is not for everyone. I know some players that discovered once they overcame their Healanxiety that it was actually their favorite role. This might sound familiar, but it is true. In fact, I know tank and healer mains that somehow have DPS anxiety because they are afraid of not performing, quote, well enough, unquote. So realizing that all of us can have a fear of not being good enough regardless of the role might already be a good start. But knowing that is often not enough when the Healanxiety originated from being afraid of failure in the first place. How do we deal with that? Personally, I believe that the most effective way to combat healer anxiety is to build knowledge on the role and to build confidence in your ability to do it safely. One of these things requires you to actually play the role. The other one you might be able to build just by learning from others. So with that, I will suggest some ways I think you might be able to combat your Healanxiety with. Maybe you can even use this knowledge to help a friend overcome their Healanxiety if they have it. Who knows? Regardless, what exactly makes each individual afraid of healing can vary, so it is perfectly understandable if not all of my suggestions can help each person, but maybe just one of them will help you. Now, to start, knowing the basics of the role, and perhaps even the specific healer you've decided to play, can help a ton with picking up the role in the first place. The simplest way to go about this is, for example, to read or watch a guide on healing. Even if you're coming into Final Fantasy XIV with knowledge of healing from a different MMO, for example, you might find yourself very lost or confused about how the role is played in Final Fantasy XIV. While, yes, the role is about healing, it is actually far more about making the most of your time than most of your MP, and that is because every second you spend healing is time spent not attacking. Obviously, keeping your group alive is always the highest priority, but hey, maybe you don't have to cast Cure 1 whenever the tank is missing a single point of HP. What I'm getting at is that healing well in Final Fantasy XIV might seem extremely backwards or unintuitive, which can further add to the uncertainty and anxiety of the role. After that, it can similarly be extremely helpful to read or watch a guide on the specific healer job you want to play. Naturally, I have both guides for healing and starter guides for every healer in the game, up to date, that you can find on this channel if you need them. The reason why watching or reading a guide on the subject might help is that once you are in the dungeon and you are the healer, maybe you don't actually know what you're supposed to do it right. Having read or watched a guide on the subject at least gives you a strong idea of exactly what you should do and watch for. It removes some of the mystery from your first go at the role. My second suggestion is that often the Healanxiety originates from the fear of failure in front of other people, or the fear of those other people judging you for said failure. In fact, for some, it is even the fear of failing those people, which can be a lot clearer of a feeling as a healer where your mistakes can lead to party members dying. To combat this, I recommend making use of the duty support feature, which allows you to do most dungeons with a party of NPCs. Granted, these NPCs are significantly inferior to the average player, however, they will not judge you, and because they are underperforming already, it also puts more emphasis on your own ability. On the other hand, due to how the NPCs play, it can be a lot harder to practice big AoE pulls with them. Still, it can be a great way to demystify the role in a safe environment. Alternatively, if you have a group of friends to play with, this isn't always the case. Then bring 3 friends to practice dungeons with. You can get even more out of this if you have a friend who is also learning how to tank. That way, neither of you in particular is carrying the other one, painting over obvious mistakes and the like. My third suggestion is to start with lower level dungeons to practice. This might be incredibly obvious if you're starting with White Mage or even Astrologian and Scholar, but I still do recommend doing this with Sage, despite it starting at a much higher level. The lower level dungeons are far more lenient, and because you don't have nearly as many buttons, you can focus on the basics. For example, in Sastasha, all healers have a basic attack and a basic heal. Most of them have a damage over time effect, and some of them have a party-wide heal. The barrier healers also have some passive healing of some sort, and Astrologian has essential dignity to react with in a tight spot. But ultimately, your healing boils down to weighing when you need to cast a heal and when you can attack safely, which is a lot simpler than at higher levels where it can get a lot more complicated. At max level, casting healing spells in casual content is often viewed as either a desperate measure or even a bad idea at times, at least not always seen as optimal. At low levels, it can sometimes be all you have, which makes it a lot more normal. This also removes the possibility of wasting a cooldown, leading to a mistake later down the line when your options are all spammable heals. At higher levels, even if you were to play like that, the incoming damage is a lot greater, so the fights expect you to do more than that anyway, making the fights go a lot faster in a way. For my fourth suggestion, this might feel like a really weird one, but a somewhat common source of some of the stress and fear of healing is never quite learning how much you actually need to heal. This can often lead some healers to never feel safe attacking ever and simply spam heals endlessly. And ironically, the fact that the healer isn't participating in attacking at all can cause large AoE pools to drag on for way longer, making the extra healing necessary as a result of not attacking in the first place. A way to combat this kind of stress or fear is to get somewhat acquainted with how much healing you actually need to do. The real answer to this, of course, varies depending on what tank you have, how much damage your group is dealing, how much is being pulled and what dungeon it is, and so on and so forth. However, understanding how much your actions actually do allows you to feel more confident in how much you need to do. The easiest way to approach this in a safe environment is to go into Sastasha with duty support as a pure healer. It has to be a pure healer because the passive healing from Eos or Cardia is partly to blame for these kinds of confusions. Enter the dungeon as Conjurer, White Mage or Astrologian. Cast your basic heal, meaning Cure or Benefic, on your tank and note how much it heals for. Now pull a pack of mobs. Wait until the tank has lost enough HP that Cure or Benefic will actually be fully spent when cast on the tank. Meaning that if the tank has, say, 400 HP and your healing spell heals for 200, you don't do anything until the tank actually drops below 200 HP. Take note of how long it takes for the tank to actually reach that point when you only pull one pack at a time, if they even do at all. If you can, you could even test this while pulling 2 packs. Notice that there is quite a long time between moments where you actually have to do anything. And also notice that your healing spell is a lot more impactful than you might initially believe. As such, you don't have to react immediately to a lot of things in a dungeon. You can take your time and plan it so you respond efficiently and effectively. Your group is not teetering on the edge at every moment. You can of course also do this test with actual players, or in a higher level dungeon, but the point is to try and get acquainted with how impactful your healing actually is, as I believe this might make the role feel a lot less stressful. And finally, for my fifth suggestion, as I said at the start, Healanxiety can often be rooted in a fear of failure, or a lack of confidence in your ability, which then can cause stress. Healing is a lot about keeping cool-headed while a lot of things are happening around you. And the most effective way to do that is to know that mistakes are okay. As a healer, you can often feel like a captive audience to the shenanigans your tank and DPS get up to, and you simply have to respond to what they do, so it is also a lot about adaptability. But the most effective way to learn all these things is to be allowed to make mistakes. A lot of this fear lack of confidence and stress can sometimes stem from the fact that there sometimes are some angry players in groups who can get very vocal if something goes wrong. The best I can suggest against this is that these kinds of players are typically the minority, and, by the way, in the wrong. If you just wiped or someone died due to a mistake on your part and they start berating you for that, that doesn't help you or them, because that breaks your confidence, making you possibly play worse. Not to mention give you less reason to keep them alive in particular if we are completely honest with ourselves, even if it is subconsciously. So if that happens, try to not let it get to you. I know it's hard, but ultimately, they are the one making a mistake now. With that said, the worst thing that can happen if you make a mistake and fail as a healer is that you wipe. That's it. Then you just go again. Sometimes I make mistakes as a healer, like the tank might be pulling extremely big and I use the wrong action at the wrong time and that leads to a wipe. I just say sorry and we go again. I simply acknowledge my mistake and we move on. In fact, often tanks will also try to take some of the blame when that happens, so there's nothing scary about it. Add to this that if you let your team know that you're rather new to healing before the dungeon starts, then players tend to be a lot more understanding and not worry as much about your mistakes. In fact, some tanks will be extra aware, maybe pull less and go the extra step to make sure their cooldowns are in order to make your job easier, because you warned them that you are less skilled as a healer. For example, a skilled white mage healer, you'd expect them to sometimes let the tank drop really low intentionally just to use Benediction to give themselves more attack opportunities. Or at the very least know to use Benediction in time if something goes wrong and the tank is near death. However, you cannot expect this consistency from a newer healer, and the Benediction might come out late, or not at all. Because it might be the last thing you think of when you are in danger, because it isn't in the arsenal of tools you'd normally use. You're still learning the bread and butter tools of the job. So, by simply letting the group know that you might not know everything, the group can more easily play around that limitation. You are essentially flagging to the team that you are less reliable than usual, which is always better than saying nothing. And if all of that was a bit overwhelming, just know that if you only took one tip with you from this video, I hope that it was the fact that the worst that can happen if you fail is that you wipe, and you can always just go again. With that said, maybe you yourself don't have Healanxiety, or maybe you are working on it, and you have found ways to work through this issue yourself. I would love to hear about those ways in the comments. If you are having a hard time starting and you need a bit of advice, then again, maybe the comment section can also help you. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me and my channel, you can let the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. And if you want to give even more support than that, you can also become a member of the channel like these wonderful people here. Fun fact, in a big AoE pool, just because the tank is dead doesn't mean the battle is over. In many dungeons, a healer can hold on by simply running away and using dots to keep up the attack, while they run towards the entrance. Which ironically means that sometimes it is better to have the tank respawn at the start of the dungeon with full HP, rather than chase the healer through the entire dungeon after being raised.